The changing physical landscapes of Stanley Park. Nestled right outside Vancouver's downtown core, Stanley Park spans over 1,000 acres and is one of Vancouver's most iconic outdoor spaces. This beautiful space is constantly changing. Through the occurrence of coastal erosion, wind damage, weathering, small-scale landslides, as well as sea level rising, this beautiful space is constantly adapting and changing. And today, we are going to explore these changes. Stanley Park is surrounded by ocean on almost all sides. Because of this, coastal erosion is one of the most present phenomena causing change within the park. There are many signs of coastal erosion found around Stanley Park. One of the most simple signs you can find is by picking a handful of sand up at one of the many beaches and looking at its composition. Upon inspection, you'll find glacial sediments mixed with oceanic sediment, being shells and seaweed. This is a small but mighty indicator of the types of erosion that have occurred in the area. Because of the intense storm cycles that tend to hit the coastal regions in Vancouver, erosion is very present, especially on the beaches and cliffs surrounding Stanley Park. The seawall was built to help counteract the process, but erosion still occurs underneath and beside it. The erosion is constantly eating away at the beaches and shoreline. When storms occur, the water will remove sediment from the beaches, causing the beaches to slowly creep towards the land. This means that in some time, these beaches could be fully swallowed from the ocean from all the sediment being removed. A less visible version of this is occurring on the coastlines as well, with debris moving underwater, pushing and pulling against the coastline. It's also slowly eating away as we speak. Another phenomena occurring within these coastal storms is wind damage. Wind damage attacks the vegetation that's planted around Stanley Park. The vegetation during windstorms is prone to falling and even unrooting itself, causing for a complete change in the landscape. A fallen tree from a windstorm can have a greater result than just a traffic jam. A tree being ripped out of the soil or collapsing can affect the vegetation below, which in turn can also affect the stability of the slope or the land that the tree had fallen on. An example of this is when looking at the steep slopes that descend down to the ocean in Stanley Park. If trees are lost there, the bank becomes less stable, resulting in severe erosion, potential landslides, as well as land movement. Alongside heavy winds, weathering is another issue occurring within Stanley Park. Heavy rainfall, much like the coastal erosion, begins to eat away at the cliff sides, removing sediment and soil and exposing roots and trees. The slopes become less stable and more susceptible to landslides and land movement. Another issue that can occur from weathering would be rock fall, as well as in some areas, rock slides. Although rockfall and rock slides are a less common occurrence in the park, they pose a very large risk for users of the seawall. As large portions of the seawall are lined with a cliff band, users have to keep in mind that after extreme weather cycles or during a freeze-thaw cycle, the outcome could be large rocks and boulders falling down from the cliff above. Although rockfall can still be an issue in some areas, the waves that naturally eroded the cliffs before the seawall was formed have smoothed the surface of much of the cliffs, making them rounded out bowls and less susceptible to rockfall and rockslide. Another less discussed change to the physical landscape of Stanley Park would be rising sea levels. Although right now this is not an issue we have to face, in the future this is something that needs to be considered. With low-grade terrain, such as the seawall, having the potential to be flooded if not fully submerged by the ocean, this would completely alter the coastline surrounding Stanley Park and potentially erode it even further from what we've already seen. Although naturally occurring processes can be accounted for much of the change in the physical landscape of Stanley Park, it's difficult to ignore the human impacts that have also changed the physical landscape of the park. Whether it be the implementation of the seawall along the coastline, the paved roads running through the park, or the extensive forestry practices and paths that have been set through the very center of the park. Human impact has had just as much change on the physical landscape as the natural causes have. Stanley Park features an extensive trail network running through the direct center. Although this decreases the foot traffic around the seawall and the busy coastline, it increases the foot traffic in a heavily vegetated area that needed to be altered to facilitate further traffic. The increased foot traffic that occurs within the park can also have an impact on surrounding vegetation. So not only does the vegetation need to be removed for the trails to be put in, but as more people travel on the trails, paths begin to widen as people step off trail, which greatly affects the environment surrounding. The seawall is one of the most apparent pieces of evidence when it comes to human alteration of the physical landscape of Stanley Park. However, the seawall's use is actually quite positive in terms of protecting the physical landscape. The seawall was put in place to slow the process of erosion down, protecting the cliffside as well as the vegetation from erosion and even protecting from flooding. Although the human impact in this scenario altered the physical landscape and changed it, it actually offers protection from the potential damage that could have been done from coastal erosion on this given area. A more negative side of the human impact on the physical landscape of Stanley Park has been the forestry practices that have needed to take place in the recent past. An infestation of the hemlock looper moth caused for around 8,000 trees to be removed. They were removed due to the risk for forest fires in the summertime, as the dead trees would fall and serve as debris for forest fires to start in such a densely populated area. There was a lot of groups outraged due to the removal of the trees. However, the human alteration to the physical landscape in this sense was to make sure that further destruction did not take place in the park. One of the final and largest human impacts on the physical landscape of Stanley Park is the Stanley Park Causeway, which bridges downtown Vancouver to Vancouver's North Shore via this Lions Gate Bridge. The causeway not only needed to clear-cut trees in order to be built, but also offers a lot of pollution into the densely forested areas on either side. Although the initial impact of the road being produced is already over, there's an ongoing impact from increased traffic as well as volume going through the road, meaning the pollution is an ongoing phenomena that'll continue to alter the physical landscape of Stanley Park for years to come. The physical landscapes of Stanley Park are an ever-changing medium, whether it be from natural processes like coastal erosion or weathering, or from human impacts such as the cutting of new paths or implementation of a new roadway. And although human impact is inevitable, we can see examples of where humans have tried their best to counteract with the change that's organically happening in the area to ensure that this beautiful place is protected for many generations to come so that everybody can enjoy the wonders of Stanley Park.